That was 3 years after the event. And what did it show? On that little old insignificant farm in Kentucky, where these two people and the dog were, Swami was there. Of all the places in the world, why in a small farm in Kentucky? He was there. So he's every place at all times. And you can certainly be sure that he is here. Now, about the topic for today, which is in a way about Vedanta. Swami said that to his devotees, that now is time for you to study something about Vedanta. He said the grammar school days and the high school days are over, and you're now in the college days. So, something about Vedanta. Even though Swami is the Lord of Love, and both he and Krishna agree that devotion is the fastest and most rapid path to union with God. Now, he also said that were you to take a regular person from the world and with the greatest care and interest explain to that person about Vedanta, one, not two, what that means, very carefully, that person wouldn't understand one word of what you were saying. And yet you are asked not just to understand one word, but to thoroughly understand the principles underlying Vedanta. Now, we are not like those people in the outside world who wouldn't understand or be interested in one word of Vedanta. We are extremely interested in Vedanta because we are interested in self-realization. We would like to trade our present lives, no matter how profitable and valuable they are. We would be delighted to change our life today and be Swami, because Swami says, I am never in sorrow. I don't know what worry means. I am always happy. No matter what happens, I am always in bliss. So we would be willing to trade our present lives, no matter how valuable they are, for that. And that is the promise that Swami lays out to us if we follow his teachings, that we will be as he is, because that is our true nature, not that we will become through practice, but that is our nature, and that liberation is just the discovery that we have never been bound, that is always our nature, day in and day out. Total, absolute freedom, fresh, ever-present bliss. And so we are very much interested in this topic of Vedanta, because what it promises to us and what it has found and delivered to sages and saints over all the ages. Now, to show Swami's great power and the great person that he is, perhaps one or two experiences might be in order. For example, the first couple of years that we were in India, we would stay in Bangalore at one of the hotels, West End Hotel, and drive out every day to Swami in the morning, drive back in the noontime, because Swami goes upstairs for about 4 hours during the day, and then come back again in the afternoon. Now, those were the days when there were a lot of hippies in India. Every place you went, you would see hippies. My wife and I went to Benares, And out in the Holy Ganges, just opposite all the temples, there was a boat filled with German hippies, playing their guitars and singing their hippie songs. And they also came to Swami's ashram. And he gave the hippies a lot of attention and tried to change their ways and put them to do some work even, for example, to help in the press. But they absolutely refused to do any work whatsoever. So at that time, a number of parents would write to Swami and say, Swami, our sons or daughters are in India, and would you please help us get them back? So that was the case here. This man and his wife came from New York because Swami had written to them, or had a message written, that he'd found their daughter. And so they came out in the morning, and not realizing the taxi situation, had sent their taxi back in town. So when the time came in the evening, late evening, Swami went upstairs again, and everybody left, they had no taxi. So they asked, could we ride in your taxi? So I said, of course you can. So in the taxi was the New York man, his wife, Victoria, my wife, the taxi driver, and myself. Now those of you who have been there know that there are two roads into Bangalore. The short road, which turns off soon after you leave Prasanthi-Nilayam, then the longer road that goes by the airport. So the driver turned off on the short road. Now it so happened that they were repairing that road, and there was a mound of earth, it was high as my shoulder, all along one side of the road, which was repair material. So we were behind a bus, and the taxi driver, being impatient, wanted to pass the bus. So he pulled around and looked, and he saw a single light ahead. And he thought, well, that is some car standing still. So he pulled around, and he put on the gas, as much as you can put the gas on in an Ambassador Indian car, and nothing much happens. But given time, the car picked up speed. And no sooner did he do that and start to pick up a bit of speed, then we realized to our horror that that car that he had seen and made a judgment about, he was totally wrong. That was a car coming directly at us at a very high rate of speed. Now when you're faced with a head-on collision, usually one of the cars will take to the ditch because there's at least a chance of survival. But here, that couldn't be done. Here was the bus on the left side, and here was this big row of earth material on the right side. No possibility of getting off that road. And here were these two cars coming like that. As soon as we pulled around, and the lights flashed through the windscreen and sort of blinded us. Like that, because we expected death any minute. Nothing happened. So we opened our eyes and looked behind us, and there in the tail light of our car, we could see through the tail light of our car, and we could see the tail light of that other car receding and going away from us. How could such a thing happen? Absolutely impossible. Swami had to distort or change both time and space. So the next morning, we went out early, and when Swami came down, I threw myself at his feet. He said, Swamiji, we thank you for saving our lives last night. And Swamiji laughed. And he said, yes, he said, you were really scared. He said, and you were so scared you even didn't think to call on Swami. But Swami saved you anyway. And so then he turned to, at that time, there were always several Telugu doctors, great devotees of his, sitting on the wall of the veranda. And so he turned to these Telugu doctors and told them the whole story. And I said to Swami, Swami, you must have changed both space and time. And he just laughed and really refused to answer entirely. And then another story that I should tell you. again showing the fantastic power and majesty of Swami. When we first went to Prasanthi Nilayam, maybe 25, 26 years ago, January 1968, there weren't any new buildings at all, just a bunch of old buildings, and the mandir without the extension to the veranda that it now has and the various improvements. And there were, I think, 8 Westerners on the campus, and not more than 35 or 40 Indians in their very early days. So they put the ladies in one old room and the men in another old room to sleep, and then they said, Swami will come and visit you in about 15 or 20 minutes. So Swami came in, and we were sitting on the floor, and he started to walk back and forth in front of us in the most graceful way, just seemed to float on the floor with his great big lustrous eyes and a beautiful smile on his mouth, just floating back and forth across the floor. So I'd heard about this man who could change your life and never change back again. And I sort of lost consciousness of the world under the room and sunk deep, deep into myself. And then I became aware of a movement in my heart, very faint, like maybe the wind from the wings of a butterfly, very faint movement. Then I realized that that was love, that movement was love. Then I realized, no, that is Swami in my heart as the Lord of love. Realized it so clearly. And so since that day, I have been a devotee of Swami. I had always thought of myself as an intellectual, because I was interested only in intellectual subjects. But I found to my surprise that I was a devotee on that day, and I've been Swami's devotee ever since. So in those early days, we were in one room, my wife and I later on, facing Swami's mandir and the window in the mandir. And he would look out occasionally and beckon to me like that. Come on up, Hislop, let us talk. So he would beckon me, and I would go up into his room and sit down with him, and we would chat. And so one time I said to Swami, Swami, you have to take care of your devotees every place. And I know from stories I've heard by now that you take care of the devotees of God, whether the person knows you or not. And you have to care for all of your schools, too. How do you have the time to sit here and talk to the likes of me? Is that a fair question? It's a fair question, wasn't it? And so Swami said, well, Hislop, it's not like that. He said, when you, for example, get into your car and you turn the key, then the car starts to run, and it doesn't need any more attention. You don't have to do anything about it. You start it running, and it keeps on running. And so he said, it's like that, with Swami. Swami turns the key, so to speak, and the universe runs itself. So I have lots of time to be sitting here talking to the likes of you.